Okay, we're reconvened. Now, just before we go to 7.3 and Phil and John, I just found out at the morning tea break that Sarah needs to depart at 11:30. So what I propose to do is to hear from Phil and John. I'll pause them at 11:20, provide an opportunity for Sarah to make any comments in terms of item 7.1 before she departs, and then we'll go back in terms of item 7.3, and then obviously when we get to 7.1 we'll have the advantage in terms of comments that Sarah has made. So I think that's probably the best way to work us through. Okay, so item 7.3, welcome to Phil and John. Now, Phil's part of the furniture here, but it'd be quite good, John, if you can just give a brief outline of who you are and what you do, and then you'll take us through the presentation that you intend to make.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here. So my name is John Kinghorn. I'm with Hamilton City Council in the transport operations space. So I'm very much involved in kind of the hands-on, the technical, and playing with all the fun techie tools and things that we have, including traffic signals, to help keep the network moving and provide that multimodal priority that we give. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity here. I do have a presentation to run through, but Phil, did you want to just cover a couple of things first?
Yeah, if I may, I think the context for this presentation was some conversations back in November around bus priority, the wider use of technologies and how we currently use those and what plans we've got for the future. And it kind of seamlessly goes quite nicely into the presentation I'll do later, which talks about how we're going to apply as well. The projects I will talk about in that presentation will rely on this form of technology. So I wrote quite a dry paper. Unfortunately, these things are quite technical. But what John's done is he's refreshed presentation he's given to colleagues in the past, and Councillor Sferra, you may have seen some of these slides, forgive us, which puts the words into a much better focus. So I think if got a bus priority focus here, but we're also looking at the immense other technologies that we've got available in our respective council teams. And I think I made a comment somewhere that we probably don't utilise people like John and his colleagues enough. I think, you know, after you'll see the presentation today, you'll probably agree with me. So we're happy just break into the presentation as we go. But John will take you through it, and there'll be probably more of a bus focus, but you'll talk about some other things as well. Over to you.
Cheers, Phil. So yeah, I thought I would just summarise briefly three kind of points through this presentation. I've got them on the screen there. So talk a little bit about the PT priority that we currently do in Hamilton. Briefly cover the tools and systems that we're developing and have developed, and also a little bit about the types of data and insights that we're collecting lately. It's just a brief kind of a high level touch on some of those things, but at least gets the idea across about the sort of things that we're doing and working on, and then hopefully provides an opportunity for some discussion. Keen to hear some feedback and things as well. So just a quick overview of the bus priority approach that we've taken in Hamilton. So we do have about half a dozen sites where we provide bus priority, typically at traffic signals, obviously, because they're our key tool to do that. There is the opportunity as well at some point to move to a citywide bus priority system at all of our traffic signals, which is a larger holistic system that is, it's quite a process to go through and get there. It's expensive, it's technical, and it also has a lot of political considerations that need to be taken into account in terms of competing modes and what do you do when there's two buses going at it and all that sort of thing. So that is a future consideration, but in general, at the moment, generalizing our city, we have one-lane roads in the city. So the best thing that we can do for buses at the moment is keep everything moving on those corridors where we do have buses. And until such time as we have dedicated space or allocated space to put buses into, and obviously some of those are coming on some of our 4-lane roads, at this point, we've been really focused on trying to keep things moving on those roads with buses. And part of that process is optimization, which is where we go around all our key corridors and we look at it from a multimodal point of view, including things like the network operating plan that we have, which is a one network initiative where it agreed the different priorities for different modes on each of our main corridors. And then we optimize those corridors to try and seek improvement. So a recent one we did was on Te Rapa Road. That was chosen because particularly the PT movements, and we were able to achieve a 36% reduction in delay for vehicles travelling up Te Rapa Road through the peak. And the graph there is the green is before the work and the red is after. That is actual real trips. This is from our network of sensors that we're picking up cars and buses going past. So that shows some of the improvements that we can get just from constantly looking and trying to improve flow around the city. So just to cover off some of the types of bus priority that we have and examples of those in Hamilton. The first one, I've just called it traffic signal detector. So this photo is from Hokanui Road by Linen Court. And this is an example where if the bus is at the intersection and is delayed, as in having trouble getting out, we've got an arbitrary figure of 15 seconds there. It automatically triggers those traffic signals at the pedestrian crossing and creates a gap in the traffic for buses to turn out or in to Linen Court. And that's very heavily used. That's used approximately every 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes across the day. We do that at a few sites around Hamilton. Second method that we've got, apologies for the engineering acronyms, but SCATS GPS, that's really just saying that the system that runs all our traffic signals is then controlled by the GPS unit in the bus. So that's used on the Comet buses, and as they travel down Anglesey Street, the example I've given is at Anglesey Thackeray. The buses are turning right there. There used to be quite a bit of delay, and we now use the real-time locations of those buses to give them a green light as they get to that intersection. And we've seen a 50% reduction in delay to the Comet buses that use that intersection as a result of this piece of tech. We've also got bus jumps. Obviously, we'll be familiar with this one on Anzac Parade, where the bus can go straight ahead from the left turn lane and they're given a dedicated B light to get them ahead of the traffic next to them. And there's more of those obviously coming, for example, out in Peacock. The bus bay merge, I called it, but this is really where we've got a recessed bus bay. And obviously buses can struggle to then move out of the bus bay into the adjacent flow of traffic. And so at a number of sites around the city, we've got detectors, and apologies for the, again, engineering diagram, but at the top left of Pembroke Street, you'll see a couple of little red boxes, and those are where we've got detectors. And if the bus starts to move forward, but is delayed because of the traffic, again, it'll trigger the traffic signals, give them a gap, and allow them to move out into the traffic. And then we've got the gold standard on its way. So this is a snip from the new intersection at Wairui Cobham, just by the new bridge into Peacock's area. And obviously we've allocated space to be able to set up full bus lanes there, and the traffic signals have all been built to provide full bus priority through that intersection. So that's just a bit of a summary of the different methods that we have available to give priority to buses, and some examples of where we do it in the city. Maybe a chance for any comments on that before I move on from anybody?
No, move on. Oh, okay then.
Morena. So I just wanted to ask, because I come from Ngākaruatu and many are deal with disabilities, mobile. So how does that work in this space? So I'll give you an example. So coming down past the police station, a mobile scooter went across the lights and the bus came down the hill. Who gives way? It should have been the mobile scooter, but she'd already gone across. So it's really about comms. How does the comms happen in that space?
Yeah, yeah, I think that touches on a wider issue we have around having social transport versus really segregated and saying, you go now, you go now, you go now. And an example of social would be a shared space where everybody's supposed to be polite and work around each other. Traffic signals are kind of the other end, where we're saying, here's a green light for you, but you stop. But I do agree that we need much better communication with the public about how to use some of these tools. Because, I mean, at some of our sites, for example, we've provided technology for mobility impaired or the elderly to be able to use the buttons at the crossings in a particular way to give them more time. But it's hard to communicate to the people that need to know that. So I think that's probably something that our comms team need to help us with. It's a good point. So just moving on to another aspect of what my team does, which is the real-time monitoring. So we have staff who proactively monitor the network throughout the day, and they're constantly tweaking traffic signals and adjusting and calling in contractors and working with other parties to just keep things moving. They're responding to crashes and all sorts of stuff. Lots of exciting things that they see on the transport network. And one of the tools that we've built, we've called TDAP, because again, we like our acronyms. And this is a tool which is a situational awareness tool, and it pulls together a whole bunch of information, all sorts of live data sources. And one of those data sources is the live bus locations and whether they are on schedule or ahead or behind of schedule. And so one of the priority tools that we have is staff in my team proactively and manually providing green lights to buses if they're delayed on the network. So that does happen. It happens constantly. I like to say that a lot of the staff in my team have a very thankless job because they're behind the scenes tweaking all the time, but nobody really knows. But you certainly know if something's wrong when you're sitting at a red light when you shouldn't. So yeah, this is at the top right there is just a screenshot from the tool, and you can see the unfortunate, rather American symbology of the buses, but they move through the network and they change green, yellow, red as they're delayed. And then my team, if they're stuck in congestion, which is an example you can see in the bottom screenshot, where you've got yellow and red arrows indicating congestion. And then the buses flash up to show that I'm a late bus and I'm stuck in traffic. And then my team jump onto that and can change the lights manually for them. So it's just another tool that we have and use. And then just moving into the kind of data and insight space, I just wanted to let you know about a couple of the initiatives that we're doing. So we've got a project which is in progress and nearing the end of it, which we've called the Townsend tool. And this is a multimodal model that I suppose you could call of the entire city, where you can click on any road in the city and you can see, even yesterday, how many people went down that road in a bus, how many people went down on a bike, how many people went down in a car. It's really people focused, not just we had 6 buses and 4 trucks go down. This is collating a huge number of data sets together and using some smarts and AI over the top of it to develop it. We've got an early draft for the CBD, which I've released there, just showing the mode breakdown on different roads in the CBD. So red is people and buses. And then we've now expanded that to the whole city and included a few other modes as well. So the idea with this is it takes a snapshot of the city. At the moment, it's every 3 months, but we are moving towards having that snapshot taken every day. And it'll provide a huge amount of value, for example, when we, I don't know, build a cycle lane or reallocate space or put in a PT route, is you'll be able to see over time the effects of that intervention and how they then rerouted traffic and maybe encouraged mode shift, because you'll be able to see people moving from different modes to other modes. So it was a lot harder than we thought, as all of my DIY projects are. But this is almost ready to be released shortly, and we're quite excited about the opportunities here. So one of the pieces of work that was required in this space was to take a lot of the data that was coming from Waikato Regional Council's bus monitoring system and translate that into information that was more useful to the way that we're presenting it. So the map that I've shown on the screen there on the left is one of the maps that we've developed, and this is a map of people on a bus going down each corridor, as opposed to number of buses on each corridor. So you can really quickly at a glance there see the darker the color, the more people traveling down that road every day on a bus. And it required quite a bit of playing around with the data and AI to allow for the cash fares and the tag on, tag off type way that people take multi-leg trips on different buses, but we're quite confident in the output now. And the little animation on the right is just showing you the fun that we can have with some of the data coming through. So that is actually a real bus trip with real pedestrians appearing before it gets to them at the stops, and then it picking them up as it goes around the Rototuna suburb. And it reminds me of those snake games from the old Nokia phones. And yeah, I would have liked the bus to get longer as it picked up people. But yeah, I find that once we start animating the data and providing it in graphs, you really can understand what's going on a lot better than, tables and charts. So, yeah, so that's the space that we're moving into. And then just to briefly cover, we're also collecting quite a lot of information on active modes as well, just to support painting a whole picture of the network. And traditionally, we've only focused on the data that's easy to collect, which is the big lumps of metal like the cars going around. But we've really tried to address this issue of how do we count the hard data sets and get a real picture of what's happening on our network. So the walking trips, even people just going down to the dairy to get some milk, how do we capture those trips and represent them fairly when we're making decisions? So we've done a lot of investment in that space as well. So here's, sorry, I've got something covering there, but there's just an example of hourly counts in the CBD on a Friday. And I just put that one up because it's interesting. One of those lines is Hood Street, which is in the green, and one of those is Barton Street. So you can see the difference between your entertainment versus your kind of shopping precincts. But we've got a number of counters around the CBD and of the whole city. We count pedestrians in about 100 locations around the city constantly, as well as cyclists and scooters as well. And then we've got some new tech we deployed last year, which we've called pulse counters. And these are actually a locally built device that can look at a whole area like Garden Place or Victoria on the River or the Transport Centre and take a snapshot every 10 minutes of how many people are in that entire space. And there's lots of users that we use that data for, including event management and incidents and alerting our crime prevention team as well. And then one of the insights we got from that was what happens to cycling numbers when it rains. And so there's a very short answer at a glance. We get a significant drop, but like 60% of cyclists don't ride their bikes if we get a few mils of rain, 10 mils of rain in a day.
Are you able to predict when it will rain?
I'll leave that to the experts, Phil. Yeah, and then I was talking about animations and displaying data, and this is one of the insights or ways that we're learning to display data. Just in the last few months, we've developed this ability, and this is a time lapse showing trips from our CBD to Rototuna, to one intersection in Rototuna, in a weekday PM peak. So this is cars and buses; it's just all vehicles. But a quick time lapse, and the colors, by the way, represent, so the light colors mean that there was a very quick trip, the green and yellows, and the red trips mean that there was relatively slow trip. So what this type of thing can show us is people take a vast number of routes to get to the same destination. There's like 8, 9 different routes that people have taken here to get to Rototuna in the PM peak. Some of them have gone all the way out to Avalon Drive to the west side, and then on the right-hand side, some of them have even used the Waikato Expressway to get from the CBD to Rototuna to go home from work. And so it shows us how Hamilton's unique in that it's got so many different trips that people can take, and people adjust their trip to work every day of the week depending on where congestion is. So that we're very data rich now, and I think the challenge for us is to now start making decisions based on this information. And the challenge for my team is how do we display that information in a way that's useful and understandable, because you can cut data any way that you like. So these are the sort of things that we're working on. And this is another example. This is showing the reach or the impact, you could say, of our bridges in Hamilton, because our bridges are really obviously important because there's such constraints on the network. Again, at a glance, you can see the red. So this is the Peacock Bridge. People are driving all the way from the southeast near the gardens up to use that bridge, and then even come back down to the likes of Dinsdale. Whereas conversely, you look at a bridge like Clawlands, which is in the purple in the middle. People do not travel far to use Clawlands Bridge. It's only if they happen to be driving past and it's convenient for them. So this type of insight can kind of really helps us with lots of things, including resilience planning and working out what will happen if one of our bridges gets closed. For example, early this week, some of you would have known there was unfortunately a cyclist hit outside NZTA, and the police came in and shut that while the serious crash unit got involved. And my team just goes flat out at that point, trying to help people get around, because as soon as you close a bridge, the whole city feels it.
We can just pause, John.
Absolutely.
And we'll go to Sarah in terms of any comments in terms of 7.1, and then we'll come back before you depart, Sarah.
I am going to talk to colleagues around who our representatives are, because I'm the alternate and we need to have at least 2 people here, and so we'll have that discussion as to how we maybe review that. I also think that, I guess, for a while I've been reflecting, and I know Angela O'Leary has too, on whether the structures are working quite right. I think there's not enough information coming to our elected members on the operations of the bus routes and understanding what's happening there. It's a one briefing, that's it, whereas I think it needs to actually be a decision making and actual direction giving from our Infrastructure and Transport Committee on what are the key priorities in terms of routes for Hamilton. Is it so that we're giving some direction there as well, endorsed by a whole council? I don't want to go into solutions, but I just think that our council is needing to review whether right now things are working and think about how it could work better. I also think, I can't make assumptions, but I would say that probably on the other side of things, there's a disconnect for many of the regional councils making decisions on, whether or not to fund bus routes, but with very limited understanding of Hamilton's situation in terms of, a plan change 12, what under assumptions made there, congestion, population growth, everything there. So we also need to think about just how do we have a more joined up decision making in that respect. So I'll leave it there, but I am also just keen to note, and Pam and I have discussed this, maybe as a noting thing in the resolution, or maybe it's not necessary, but that we will try and have that meeting between our 2 full councils before the submission opportunity on the annual plan. So appreciate the discussion around that, and thank you for your support in helping to make that happen, Pam. So yeah, so thank you so much. I have another juggling a sick 2-year-old today.
Okay. No, thanks, Sarah.
Cool, thank you.
You can just push your button there. So we'll come back to 7.1 later on the meeting, and I'll flick back to you, John.
Yeah, so I'm just finishing off with a few insights at the moment that we've gained from the data that might be of interest to you. We also look at our gateway volume. So this is all of the roads that leave Hamilton and extend into the greater Waikato area. And just looking at the trends and how they're used as well. I probably won't talk on that much. Now, this is an interesting insight that we identified recently. And this is the number of people that travel into Hamilton City to work here that don't live in the city. And so Hamilton, which is on the right-hand side of that little graph there, that's the highest out of all of the cities that we looked at. This is through the census data. Even higher than Auckland, which, Auckland is the second to the right, so very small, but it kind of makes sense when you think about the size of Auckland. Most of the trips are internal, but Hamilton City, it's about 160,000 trips across our city boundary every day to come and work in the city. People like me that live just outside the city but leech off the city. So it was an interesting insight, and one that's going to direct us in how we think about, probably the need as well to be more collaborative in operations with other councils around us as well.
I can just mention that, I think that's a really strong point around why future-proof exists. Like, it goes beyond our future-proof boundaries, obviously, but that is the link, that is a significant link of transport with the hinterland of Hamilton. And it's always been there, and that statistics, you're actually showing it, which is really, really good to have good information.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah,
on
I
that
did,
too?
just on
Yeah.
that one as well. Yeah, yeah, really interesting. I suppose that data gives you the almost the mandate for things such as congestion charging and the wider conversations around park and ride, etc. as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, we'd be very keen to see how we can better supply these insights to decision makers. And, data-led decision is the thing that we're all going for, but getting it there is a challenge.
Just, sorry, if I could, just clarification. So you're saying people working in the city that don't live here. So is this data specifically working as opposed to coming here for education, high school, university, access to healthcare, access to retail? Do you know
Yeah.
for sure that this is just work, or?
It's based on the census data that asked the question about travel to work.
Okay,
So we are assuming that that is work related.
Right.
But
thank you.
It lines up with other data that we have where we just generally look at all trips coming across the boundary and our understanding of where those trips go and whether they're likely to be education or not. It generally lines up with our expectation, but it was really interesting to see it like this. Just generally looking at traffic volume in Hamilton, the little plot there just shows the population growth we've seen in green and then overlaid with what we see in terms of traffic volume in the blue. And it generally follows, which is what you'd expect. But then some areas like Rototuna, which is that one there, have a much higher traffic volume than growth. And that then impacts in terms of journey time and congestion as well. And I suspect a lot of that is actually construction traffic to do with the Rototuna suburb getting built. Just some trends. So TomTom monitor the whole country as well as other places in the world. And they've actually shown Hamilton was the only one in their top 6 cities which had a reduction in travel time between 2022 and 23. And I'd love to take the credit for that and say it's because of my team's optimization, but I think there's a lot of, hopefully we helped. But yeah, I think there was a lot of things that contributed to that. And also, of course, depends how they've measured and cut that data. But it generally lines up with some of the information that we've seen as well. The other thing that we've seen, and this is, I think, largely to do with the impacts of the COVID-19 lockdown times that we had, but we've seen the shape of the peak change in Hamilton. A lot of inside the city, we've almost used up all the capacity of our roads in the PM peak. So as we get more trips, what ends up happening is that peak flattens out and it happens for a longer period of time. And so that's generally what we're seeing as well happen in the city. And of course, we've seen some really solid PT growth over the last few years as well in Hamilton, 26% increase. And then this is looking at the 2023 census data. So this is travel to work PT mode. So this is, again, specifically work trips and the suburbs that they're most used. So yeah, we're seeing 8.3% mode share for public transport in Greensboro and 7% for walking. So that's the highest in the city. That's over by the uni. But overall, in Hamilton, we're seeing about 3.3%. And one of the pieces of work that we're doing at the moment is kind of looking at each of the key suburbs in Hamilton and understanding mode share in those suburbs because they vary quite a lot across the city. And that should be influencing our decision making as well. I think that's pretty much it. So hopefully that's giving you a bit of a flavor for some of the things that we do. Yeah.
Pamela and then Angela.
Thank you so much for sharing that information with us. I didn't realize the Big Brother was watching all the time. So good to know. Also, I probably am one of those 160K that drive into Hamilton from the Waikato district. But really, really interesting and useful information, particularly the one that showed the ridership on buses around Hamilton. I'm sure that others around this table have often heard the comment about, ghost buses and empty buses. And so it's really useful to have that type of data to say, not a lot of empty buses there. You might see it in a snapshot of time, but over the entirety of the route, we do see patronage. And so thank you for providing us with some insight into the data that we can access. Kia ora.
Angela.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good points, Pamela. Yeah, really fascinating what technology can do and provide us with. Yeah, so yeah, big thank you to HCC for your investment in this. And yeah, it's really interesting that it confirms, those really high frequency corridors that we're building towards for frequent bus services, especially on the east as well. I just wanted to bring in as well, at a recent meeting of ours, we looked at bus back advertising, and part of that discussion was around the courtesy signs for please let the bus go first. So yeah, just really interested in, obviously you don't need to comment, but yeah, the use of technology alongside those courtesy signs about at just every bus stop, letting the bus get back into traffic so that where we don't have bus priority or it's not in use yet, that buses are not left waiting, trying to get back into the traffic as well. So yeah, just really keen to work with the team around the size of those signs and the placement of them moving forward. Yeah, because I think they're really essential, especially moving forward with the volumes of traffic that we are seeing, and just almost changing that behaviour that instead of trying to beat the bus, if you let the bus go in, then the bus gets that green light and so do you. So yeah, but yeah, thank you once again for your investment. Appreciate it.
Just add a comment to that. I completely agree. My father was actually a bus driver for 9 years in Hamilton, and so growing up and riding the bus and understanding that, and my perspective, I feel like the attitude has changed a bit, unfortunately, to the negative, and you see less people letting the buses in these days than you used to. And maybe it was just because I grew up hearing him say, "You always let the bus in, you always let the bus in." So I'm interested in, I think there's two aspects here, is how do we socialise that better and create that culture of letting the bus go first, but secondly, how can we use technology to help? And so that's the area that I'm passionate about as well, and whether that's electronics or whatever. So yeah, keen to continue that discussion.
Any other further questions or comments? Phil, anything?
Yeah, can I just link it back to the whole program and the MSP stuff? Like we are data driven and we've been data driven for decades, but we're just getting better and better data. So John and his team are very much integrated in some of the projects that we talk about and bring here, whether it was 3 years ago or what's in the next paper. But John's there telling us, what to do, and the link between the strategic planning, so the space that we're really in, and obviously the data, I think it was just there to see in that presentation today. So it's wrong to say John's one of the backroom boys because he's in the front telling us what to do because of the quality of the data you saw today. And I think, we scratched the surface today. So if this is something that you would want to see more of, John delivers great presentations. You just saw that, and I've got to deliver one next. It's not going to be half as good. So I think we can do more of that. But a lot of the things we talked about today are, it's not fair to say business as usual, but they are part of our current processes. But this just makes us do these things better and communicate better with people like yourselves. Because visually, I'm a very visual person. I hate the tables and the maps I produce sometimes. This stuff is great. Thanks.
No, if there's nothing further.
Sorry, just one more thing. It is so useful and so fantastic. I would love to see us harvest this great data and somehow package it up in a manner that we can then share it with members of the public. through social media, through, here, check out this YouTube link that shows how traffic moves around. Even to the earlier conversation we were having around ensuring that councillors across councils understand the various challenges and opportunities. That sort of visual representation is so useful. So some way that we can package that up into nice little bite-sized bits that we can share, that would be really useful.
Yeah, thank you,
Eugene,
Chair.
and then Mayor Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from Chair Pamela's comments, fantastic presentation. The layers of technology and information is I didn't think we were nowhere near where we were there. I would like, if possible, at some stage to be able to have that short little bit of that presentation around that technology being used to be able to be presented at our infrastructure meeting at some stage, just so our councillors as a whole get understanding of the technology and what we do in this space here. And also, as the information provided, we've got many of our residents travelling into the city and that. And I just think it's a really, would be a really good presentation for our councillors to understand what we're doing, the technology we're using, the technology that Hamilton City are using is, yeah, it's an amazing presentation. Couldn't believe the detail that you can get down to. Very good, thank you.
Yeah.
So I've got Mayor Adrian and then Gaining.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's always very interesting when you collect data and what you can use it for. What problems are we trying to solve, or what are the opportunities? Because there's a lot of data out there, and it's how well do we use it? Is it pertinent to the needs? And this was actually quite cool because it actually shows a lot. It gave a lot of information, right? Really painted a picture. Whereas sometimes when you collect data, you've got to decipher it and then, well, is it useful or is it, so yeah, it was nice to have that visual. It's great.
Gaining.
I think that I just wanted to raise that the common knowledge of the population in Hamilton about where build-ups are during the day should be taken into account too. So I'm a Hamilton commuter every day. So I know if I leave my house 2 minutes later, I'm going to get there. So most of Hamilton have a knowledge of where the build-ups are. It's those who come in that create that build-up. So there is a knowledge out there already of commuters within the Hamilton City, how to get around.
Phil, I can just press your button there.
I was saying we probably do a lot of real-time observations to back up that data. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay, if there's nothing further, and certainly just supporting the acknowledgement that a number of the members have outlined. So well done. And also, as it's great to see a very easily understood evidence base. And I just, in terms of when I do hearings commissioner work, and you get a tome like that, full of tables and that, yet this type of presentation gives you a very quick snapshot that is understandable in terms of what's happening. So well done on that. So, and thanks very much in terms of coming along and presenting, guys, on that today. Really helpful. So it's been moved to receive the report by Mayor Adrian. If I give a second to Liz, there's nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour, say aye. Against, carried. Thanks very much, John. Phil, we'll move to 7.4, work programme and funding.
Just trying to get a presentation up on screen. So do I share again, Brooke, like I did before? Or? Yeah.
You've got a very high standard to meet.
So sorry, but I'll just wait for the.
Do it all the time now.
Sorry about that.
That's
so
all right.
the
Oh.
paper, well, Doug's doing. Sorry. Well, Dave's sorting out the tech.
Here we go.
Oh, here we go. So really, this paper was really around the program and the funding of the. Okay, thank you, mate. The program and the funding for the Transport Working Group based on the LTP funding decisions for this LTP period. So a little bit drier than the previous presentation, but I have tried to link it into a bit more of a strategic planning focus. And I do have a brand new presentation, which I haven't actually run past my own council yet, and I'm going to test it out on you today to try and see whether it makes some sense around why we prioritise the corridors that we do and how we use the strategic transport planning work we've done in the recent past, including the regional councils, PT pathways, including our freight work, including the work we've done around bus rapid transit, amongst other things, to come to the point where we make the recommendations we do about the corridor studies in this report. So essentially, if I go back to the actual funding side of things, the Hamilton City Council, in terms of the Transport Working Group, we all fund, or we all try and fund, and obviously that's subject to various constraints and LTP decisions. Where we've ended up for this period is what we branded at Hamilton City as multimodal master plans, which are essentially the ongoing studies to keep the aspirations of the Metro Spatial Plan going. So it's the BRT and everything else. And I still think this is consistent because it's gone through a lot of QA. The Regional Council have matched that funding as well, which is fantastic. As you know, NZTA have stepped away from local transport funding right now. And it's probably not fair to say that the WIPA and WDC haven't funded, because there are bits and pieces of their funding still around from last year that we're modifying to things like the active mode study that Michelle ran last year, and integrating that into our program as well. So, but the bulk of the funding from LTP decisions over the last few months is coming from Hamilton City and the Regional Council. So what we have done as a working group, so and obviously all your staff are present on that, is try and come up with a program that's still related to the implementation of our Metro Spatial Plan recommendations and consistent with the work we've done to date. But we've had to mould our process around GPS and around still keeping that eye on having, fingers crossed, a better funding environment in 2027. So like PT Pathways, it was geared up to really inform 2027 funding decisions. So we're lucky we haven't got huge amounts of money, but we've got enough to keep things going. So in a nutshell, and I'm going to kick into a presentation in a minute, we've done some previous work that's focused around where we need to increase our freight and logistics capacity. We've done previous work that's looked at where we want our future bus rapid transit system to appear. We've linked it to growth. We've linked it to a kind of a transition period, which is where PT Pathways and other regional council planning kicks in. We've linked it to, again, from a Hamilton City perspective, infrastructure, linking into that as well, infrastructure funding. And we've branded it as multimodal corridor studies, because we need to demonstrate to our future funders, hopefully, that our strategic work that we've done in the past is still relevant, and we are still ticking boxes around investment objectives from both the Metro Spatial Plan work and the GPS. So that focus on freight, but still maintaining that focus on aligning PT around where people want to live. So that Plan Change 12 stuff, that link to, what Chris Bishop loves, getting the buses along to where we're actually planning to do some rapid transit or frequent transit routes. So I can't wait till next time it comes down here because we can just go, here's some work done. So cutting down to the nitty gritty, what your working group is proposing is that we carry on those corridor studies almost now to a point, because we've done a lot of work already. We've tested concepts. We have looked at land and property issues. Obviously, we are now getting into very sensitive territory. But now we want to get to a point where we do again, utilising the money we've got, which is nice, but it's not huge. So we're going to try and be clever around it. Get to the point where the next funding decision we probably come to you with is really the build, is really the detailed design. We're going out there, we're buying property, we're starting to take land, and we really are starting to look like an Auckland North Shore busway, or we're really, it's going to start looking very serious on the ground. And obviously that's going to be a long process, but you've got to start somewhere. Does that make sense so far? So it should really link up to what I've been talking to you about for a few years now. So the reason we say we branded it as multimodal studies is because we need to not forget the fact that we've got in Hamilton and other councils as well, we've got really great thinking around walking and cycling. We've got great thinking around public transport, and now we've really got up to speed on the freight work that we talked about back in November. They all share the same corridors. As you heard John say, we need to get better about the space we use. We don't have money to buy up lots of property. We don't have money to buy land. We don't want to encroach into Claudelands Park or other places like that unless we really, really have to. And we need to keep an eye on the objectives we want to try and focus on. So where does that leave us? It leaves us in the projects that I've been talking about here in our draft program. So really from point 14 onwards, talks about the need for these multi-mode corridor investigations. And what I'll start doing, just to highlight some of our strategic thinking. This is a presentation I put together for Hamilton City, and I haven't given to them yet. And I've used the final slide in the paper to try and show that there is a little bit of an evidence base and a trail, and it utilises a lot of the work that John just talked to you about around why we come to the decisions we have around the corridors we do, or we've challenged ourselves on the work that we've done to date, and we're still confident that we're going in the right directions and still consistent with where we think we can achieve funding on further down the line. So I'm going to sort of talk about the pathway that we've got to in this decision making. Again, this is a nice lesson around transport planning, around integrating transport and land use, and just making use of the strategic work we've done, but then putting a hold on it, because we now want to start doing stuff. We now want to start, doing our frequent routes, doing our bus rapid transit, and encouraging this growth around corridors at the same time, servicing our commercial and industrial areas. So we talk about where our growth is going to be, and I'm going to go through these slides quickly. We can always come back to them. We've got our fast track areas. We've got other growth areas, and this is Hamilton centric, but this will apply to the whole area as we go into our studies. We've got other growth areas for our own growth strategies, and also the response to the recent emerging areas work. So we know where we want to grow. We've got other factors that are coming into this equation as well. We need to manage parking, and we need to manage parking around our corridors, around our freight corridors, around our bus corridors, but we also need to manage our parking around certain other growth areas. That is part of our bigger strategic picture as well. This is where the freight study kicks in. So you look at where some of these recommendations starting to emerge. You can see the corridors, they look very familiar because we want to put buses along them as well. So the freight study, and you've seen this back in November, has some 10-year recommendations and has some 30-year recommendations around how we need to really find capacity along these corridors to service what is forecast as a considerable increase in freight traffic. There we go. That's what a 10 and 30-year scenario looks like in terms of where we need to focus our corridors. Now, again, you look at the northern one, that's where we want to put our buses as well. We've got ongoing safety programs. Again, there's going to be loads and loads of intersections that aren't on these slides, but those ones there, for instance, are along where one of our key freight and BRT routes is going to be, so linking Frankton to Ruakura. There are other problem intersections across the whole city and across the whole region that we need to factor into our strategic network planning. And here we start kicking into PT pathways and the work that the regional council leads. So the work that Phil touched on earlier around how we get to 2027 and use the funding we've got available now, and how we start preparing for potentially the kicking off the PT pathways recommendations if the funding allows us. So there's the first 10 years of PT pathways. There's the 20 years. This is our frequent network rolling out. Again, you've probably seen these slides in different forms. I've just mapped it onto a new GIS base. And there we go with our expanded network. So that's a series of, so it's very similar to the future networks in the RPTP. But it's up to date with PT pathways. Then we start mapping some catchments over it because Auckland does these graphics really well, and I've never seen us do them. So now we've got 400, 600 metre walk catchments around our buses, and we're pretty much covering the entire city. How fantastic is that? Now we start lapping up our BRT future aspirations. So this is further on down the line, and you see the green route going north. You see the big thick line through Anglesey Street where all our routes start to merge, right? And this is the focus a lot of the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund work that Hamilton City is doing with KO right now. And I can't wait to bring it to the table. I can't wait to show you. It's really cool. The line out east is the link to Ruakura. Is our eastern BRT corridor via 5 Crossroads. We've also what you'll see on a map coming up. We've got obviously the Clyde Street route as well, where the existing Meteor goes. That's fallen out of our BRT work, but it's also where a lot of freight traffic's going to be. And we've got our line down south, which is still our BRT to the airport. A lot of this is dependent on where Southern Links ends up. Obviously, that's a huge investment case. It's taken up a lot of our time right now. So we're going to have BRT to the airport one day. We're going to have park and ride down there. I think we're going to have to wait and see what falls out of the Southern Links work to determine actually where that's going to go. And again, we've done some work behind the scenes to inform that study. Just going quickly through, you map over some BRT catchments on top of those. What that doesn't show is all the other local networks that feed into it. And again, the catchment remains the same, but the frequencies are just fantastic. So you're actually going to get more out of those catchments. And there you see it. So that's really the RPTP on steroids a little bit, and then you've got the catchments over it. So, but also we've got the cycle network. This is still part of our thinking. I know it's not the flavour of the month in terms of funding opportunities right now, but it will be again one day. So look, this is again Hamilton City. These are short-term stuff. You would have seen all this before. Starting to think about longer term, and then more. And I press the button. So you merge all those together, and you get the graphic that's in the committee report. And again, I hope this is working for you, because I did. You are the first people to see this actually. So you've got everything on that plan, and what you see really there is the focus of what I've been talking about in this paper, which is 2 corridors going out east. So the 5 Crossroads linked to Ruakura. So really that was something that fell out of the BRT work, but then got reinforced as a key corridor through the freight work. It's responding to growth. It's responding to the fast track out there with things like R2 that's going to link into that network. So it just shows, again, good old-fashioned transport planning, strategic land use planning. Hey, we've got a corridor there that's got multiple uses. What do we do about it? We kind of knew that already, but now, Chris Bishop or NZTA, look at this. We've got such a strong evidence base, and we'll get John to do a presentation. It'll make it look even better. And then you go further south, and you've got the Clyde Street. So we've already got a fantastic frequent route out there. It's going to link to obviously the other networks outside of Hamilton. What can we do there? Can we still get BRT down there? Probably can. That is one of the corridor studies I want to do as part of this work. The big one, and I think the first cab off the rank, is north. So we'll talk about Anglesey Street in a minute, but if you look at the map there, obviously you've got a very strong strategic focus, and look at it as problems to be solved along that corridor. So go back to 3 years ago when we did that PBC, we made growth assumptions, we made land use assumptions. I think we probably undercut it like most people did. But basically we do have a problem to solve up there, and that problem is access, congestion, serving growth. We've got a plan change up there as well now, the Fonterra plan change, which is going to mean, whereas already behind the scenes, we're being challenged on what BRT is going to look like by developers up there. So I'm working rapidly behind the scenes with other people to sort of, already start to protect land. When the zero emission bus study, which the regional council are leading, starts kicking in and getting ready to report, it will need to incorporate this work because we need bus storage along these corridors. We're going to start investigating park and ride. We need to charge these buses. Some of our strategic thinking is going to be challenged by the work that the Regional Council have just commissioned, and that's great because it all develops our evidence base. So these corridor studies are what I am proposing as part of our work group program, really for the next 3 years, but really it's 2 because, you know, where we are already. So again, we're playing with the funding we've got. For me, this is a sensible transport planning approach that's consistent with all our work to date in a funding envelope that we've actually got to, it's actually been agreed. So outside of this work, there will be other bits and pieces, like always happens with a working group, that come through. A good example is the active mode work that WDC led last year. We've still got an unfunded rural access strategy that we developed with Shane Solomon. That's still part of our program, but we haven't quite got money for. I mentioned the need for an implementation plan as part of the Transport Working Group program. That's a very high level document that's going to say, if we're going to do PT pathways, if we're going to do this, we're going to do that, here's where we're going to need to do it. So I've already got a draft of that. I can always share it at our next meeting or at any occasion. So there is, again, more information that we can help you make decisions around funding further down the line. So the amount of information we've got, as John said, is actually quite colossal now, but that's deliberate. That's what you charged us to do. So I'll stop talking now. Hopefully that does make sense around some of our decision making. And I hope you like the presentation because, like I say, no one's seen that before, so I hope it worked.
Okay, thanks, Phil. I'll open it up for comments and questions. Chair Pamela.
Thanks for that. Love good visuals and all of that. That's fantastic. I suppose just a message I would send to the transport working group is I understand that Hamilton City is who has developed these graphics and things like that. The critical thing around future proof is being able to illustrate through the graphics we use how this ties into the rest of the future proof area. How the focus on this, the areas that you're looking to study are going to deliver benefits to the wider subregion. But fantastic presentation. Not quite as cool as the little moving thing, you know, around the streets. Not quite as cool as that, but you know, work in progress. Love it.
Thank you. Yeah, no, point taken. I knew that someone would say that. But yeah, it's
Okay.
Look, I think I've bored you to death on this already, but there is a network solution to this whole program, and there is absolutely, you know, this network's got to work for us to get the buses in from Cambridge or Te Awamutu. And you know, obviously the bit I talk about up the top, which is going up towards Te Awa Lakes, that's going to link into the buses that are going to come down from Taupiri, Narrawaki. We don't need BRT in Narrawaki, not yet, but we are going to need somewhere for those people to change there or for the buses to come through. And that's in the detail of some of the work we did on that BRT proof of concept work last year. There are appendices to say, yeah, you can actually do that. And yeah, we've already given guidance. Hopefully, is helping with the bus contracting conversation that's going on now around the amount of buses and when we're going to need them and the level. Oh, sorry, the number of buses we're going to need to make a 30-year network work. So, you know, it's a ton of data out there now. It's quite fantastic. We're not behind Auckland or Wellington on this stuff. We're holding our own on this. It's really quite cool. In fact, with people like John, we're probably better than them. So.
Just before I go to Angela, and just following up Chair Pamela's comments, I think that wider context would be helpful too, Phil, particularly in terms of the future-proof partnership engagement with ministers, MPs and others, so they can actually see how it fits together. So, you know, a couple of other images picking up that would be very helpful. Angela.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, following on from that, see in the recommendation is around funding, and paragraph 6 says one of our biggest constraints is funding moving forward. And traditionally, you know, that those funding pots have come from NZTA and HCC, WRC. Yeah, has there been, could you see any opportunity to, I don't know, widen? I know we talk about value capture and developer contributions, etc. But could you see any opportunity to widen the net as to who else might want to contribute towards this sort of thing, specifically in regards to, I don't know, big corporates and their social responsibility with towards climate action, that sort of thing?
Yeah, excuse me. Well, the answer is definitely yes, but I don't think I've got much more to add than the value capture conversation. That's like a big part of the Southern Links work, for instance, is around value capture. You remember the report we brought to you back in November around the economic analysis we did around rapid transit, where we talked about the rating uplift along these corridors. That did highlight a couple of local examples now in terms of new businesses that have come in, like land revenue and whatever. So I think when and again, hopefully those graphics showed or will show developers and commercial entities that are thinking of locating here that, oh my God, there's going to be, at least a bus every 2 or 3 minutes along this corridor. It gives us a little bit more evidence to sort of say to them, okay, well, why don't you pay for the bus station that we're going to put outside? And a lot of these things are actually joint ventures if you look across cities. So I think it just gives us more potential now because we've done the planning to have those conversations. And I think some of this is dipped into in some of the regional deals work as well, in terms of a principle that we want to follow. That other people know more about that than me, but I think the answer is a definite yes to your question. It's how we do it that we probably need to have a conversation around.
Okay, so just confirming there's no legal constraints or legislative.
No, I don't think there is. Not I'm aware of. I've seen other people do exactly what you've just proposed, but they're a lot more advanced in their network planning. So,
okay, good to know. Thank you.
You're Adrian.
Yeah, I really enjoyed, obviously, you've put the last graphic in our paper and to show the layering, because it's basically what it is, and all the different things that go into painting this picture tells the story, right? And I agree around north, south, east, west, it's a bit more than that. There's probably 5 tentacles, but what that opportunity might mean, and in the future around park and ride, what is possible and what is going to be just a route in the future. But it wasn't that bad. I thought, you were talking it down. It actually wasn't that bad because you rattled through and it was graphic. So well done.
Galen.
Right. Yes, I thought that was great. I've heard about corridors for many years. And it was great until we got to 5 Crossroads. So just areas like 5 Crossroads, they were the old Housing New Zealand houses, the first New Zealand houses were put into that area. Anything around those kind of areas would be interesting to Ngā Karu because they're prominently made of Māori citizens indeed. So I'd be interested in anything that.
Oh, you'll be the first to know. Yeah, I know. We take all these projects through there.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of our decisions are based around the opportunity that's potentially there. Knowing that if we can't do maybe a bit more denser housing on corridors, and maybe one corridor isn't going to be as good as we think it could be, but sometimes there are reasons for that. So really, it's understanding the potential and also just try addressing congestion problems and emissions problems. But there's going to be a lot of talking around that needs to be done yet. But we're getting to that meaty end of that gritty end of the process, I think. So it's nice problems to talk about.
It's nothing further. Anything in conclusion, Phil?
Well, no. Apart from hopefully there's a general level of comfort. Your staff have obviously seen this, and I think there's a general level of comfort from the group that Phil chairs, the technical group that Phil chairs. Obviously things change, but that's the core of what we're trying to propose. And I guess the one thing that I found in the last couple of days that is going to be an impediment to this program is the just the attacks on the industry and the redundancies. To put it quite frankly, our consultant pool has probably halved, and literally very, very local actually to this room, even in the last few days. So I've been going through procurement strategies and discussions right now, and half the people that have worked on the previous work that have helped inform this no longer either live in New Zealand or have a job. And that's going to be a real problem for us, particularly in the way that we're locked into a professional services panel. So that's actually starting really to hit us. Yeah. Just a risk.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just comment on that? Thank you so much for sharing that with us, because it's really important that those of us who might be having conversations with ministers have that type of anecdotal information to share and talk about the impact that it has not only on us locally, but also in terms of being able to deliver on national direction on various matters. So thank you for sharing that.
And
You're Adrian.
yeah, if I just add to that, I think it's not just about funding, it's the capacity and the resource. You know, that's the thing, is that that's what it's identified as, capacity and resources disappearing and the gaps that creates. Interesting.
You can, thanks very much, Phil. And there was a good positive feedback to your presentation as you going to give it to your council later on. So before you, at 7.4, there are 2 recommendations: to receive the report and endorse the direction around funding allocation and program, which is outlined in the report attachment. So if I can have a mover and seconder for that. Okay, thanks, Chair Pamela. I think Eugene seconded. There's nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. I will now move to report 7.5, the PT operations report. Vincent and Trudy.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. I'm here and with Trudy to talk about the PT operations report. With your permission, Chair, I would like to take the report as read, and I'll highlight a few things that's coming out from the report. And also just apology in advance in terms of there's no cool visual aid or interactive mapping prepared, but that's certainly an area that the team is looking at in terms of how we can present the information better going forward. So we've taken the note and from today, especially the work done by John. Yes. In terms of operational updates, so just want to highlight a few things. For the Waipa contract, the 2 new double-decker EVs are now in full operations. This marks the full rollout of the EVs for the Waipa contract and added capacity for the network. There's still some minor infrastructure issues, but work is underway to resolve these. It won't have any impact to the current operations. For the Te Huia service, another very good news. We introduced a new stop at the Pukekohe station, and so this went live on 10th of February, along with all the changes to the bus route for Pukekohe, the Tuakau Pocono to Pukekohe service. So this will provide a much improved access for residents in Tuakau and Pocono and Pukekohe as well, in terms of getting to Auckland or to Hamilton. Another thing I just want to highlight is the national ticketing solutions. So as noted in the report, there have been some changes to the implementation timeline. So the Waikato is currently earmarked for implementation in late 2025 this year. So I've noticed there was some discussion already around some of the balance transfer and some of the issue we need to resolve. But I guess underneath this work, there's a lot of work streams being developed in terms of reviewing our current fare policies, in terms of data transfer from the current in the system into the new system, as well as the retail strategy Also including the installation of ticketing machines. So there's a lot of different work that will need to happen as part of this transition. And this will become quite a big project for the team. I think it will involve everyone within the team for the delivery of this NTS.
Can I just jump in there? I mentioned earlier that because national ticketing is a regional change for us, our planned approach is to be taking that work through the Regional Transport Committee. Obviously, this is named as a PT committee, but it affects everybody. So we wanted to do it in a way that meant that other districts were kept up to speed with that too. So.
Okay, I guess the last thing I want to talk about is the network performance. So I guess the key headline here is the patronage growth has slowed down in this quarter. While we have still seen a positive growth in this quarter, but it is nowhere close to what we have experienced over the last 18 months. I guess whilst it's easy to label this as because of the fare increase that were introduced last year, I guess just for context setting, it is important for committee to recognise, I guess for Q4 or the last quarter of each year, it is typically the lowest patronage quarter. There's a lot of, school holidays, Christmas periods. We're also running reduced timetable during some of the holiday periods. So I guess the result tend to be a bit more skewed. There's a bit more noises in the data. So just want the committee to be mindful in terms of not reading too much into one quarter, especially Q4 of each year. Secondly, I just want to stress the double-digit growth that we have seen since March 2023. One of the key drivers is really the PT improvement that we have made. So thinking about from March 23, so we were coming out of COVID. So a bit of growth gained through the rebounding of coming out of COVID, we gained quite a bit of substantial growth. And then we've introduced Hamilton Refresh. There was the half price sort of PT fees introduced by the government. We also introduced the Meteor in kind of September 2023. And then the last one being the Hamilton network changes. So I guess just for context setting, I think this sort of helped to bring our growth, to keep our growth at that higher level. And this sort of marked the first quarter that there wasn't any sort of major improvement that we have made over the last sort of 10 to 8 months. So I guess it's natural to expect the growth will come to a more sort of average point around 2 to 5%. I think that's quite common to see across the region without any sort of major improvement or stimulus to your network. The natural growth sort of in that 2 to 5% range. So I guess it's probably a point to make, in terms of we may need to adjust our expectation, so the 10, 20% growth, it's not sustainable. You can't have a network that continue to strive in that sort of growth. The natural expectation is around 2 to 5% in line with your population growth without any sort of major changes or improvement. I guess that would be my last comment. Happy to take feedback or comment, questions.
Okay. Questions around the table? Liz?
Yeah, look, thank you for your report. Wasn't all bad news for Waipa, though, was it? So, first of all, just want to comment on the double-decker buses that have arrived in Te Amutua and Cambridge. They are superb, and I think what it's done is it's now first of two things it's done. First of all, they're very visible, right? So it's a promotional tool in itself. And hopefully more people understand that public transport and the numerous services that are now available to our towns, which is very welcomed. I'm interested in your thoughts about how patronage is working with those double deckers. I mean, we've seen some big increases, so interested in your comments around that. Secondly, the increase of 38%. I'm really, I'd love to know what the breakdown of that is between our two towns. we could get some friendly rivalry going on between our two towns, so who's got the best patronage. And I honestly just don't know, whether it's coming from Cambridge or Te Awamutu, so it'd be great to understand how that might be working. The only, I guess, other thing is that the evening buses are still, the patronage is low. And I don't want to be in a situation where if we don't use it, we lose it. Because I think it's a really, we fought hard to get extra services, and for the majority of the services, they're going really well. But the evenings in particular are still very, very low. So what can we do together to work on promoting those services was my other question. Now, I also wondered with the convenience of the chair and the approval of the chair, whether Roger, who's done some analysis on some of the Cambridge services, whether you might allow him speaking rights after,
Yes, yeah,
just a few minutes. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. I'd first of all like to acknowledge Trudy. I mean, I just asked her to get me some figures on Tuesday, and then I received the figures yesterday, and they're really, really useful. I think the comment was made earlier on of the importance of elected members of the DCs having an understanding of the dimensions and the profile and the need for public transport. Now, this data which you've given me, which I've analysed a little bit, but will go towards that. And what we've got is we've got each of the departures inbound and each of the departures outbound, but we've actually got the passenger definition of which are taking the Leamington to Hamilton, which are taking Cambridge to Hamilton, which are purely in Hamilton, and which are purely in Cambridge. And the thing that really hits me is that actually 20% of that service, or 25% one way and 22% the other way, is actually within Hamilton. And so the figures that we're looking at is actually showing that it has a good percentage of local Hamilton use. But on the other extreme, those people that are just using the service now, which is a regular service, and it's a good number of departures. I mean, it's 28 one way, 31 the other way. So it's providing an opportunity for local transport. But the percentage of the passenger numbers is actually only 6%. And that's really surprising to me. So it shows that we, as a council, have got some work to do to understand that. Why? Because we hear in all of our LTPs and annual plans that the demand is there for local public transport to bring people in from the suburbs into our CBD. But for some reason, that's not happening now. Admittedly, we only had the introduction of the increased departures. The figures that you give me are 6 months, perhaps only 3 months of that is the new departure. But I'm really, really hopeful that we can get this information, on, say, a quarterly basis, so we can begin to see those patterns and begin to ask our own questions about, do we have the right route in terms of the service of that local sector between Leamington and Cambridge? And also, what can we do to promote use of that service? Because they're saying we're wanting it, and yet we're not using it. So there's, just in the time that I've had it, it's been great. So thank you very much. And obviously, I'll be sharing this with the rest of my members, but a lot of questions already coming out on that. I'll give you a copy of the little graph that we put down the bottom of, and I'm sure that you've done that anyway. But so can I just say thank you very much, but can we have more of that information that we can deal with to ask and question some of the definition of PT around Cambridge and possibly, obviously, TA as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roger.
Sorry, through you, Chair. So I just want to respond to Councillor Gordon. Roger, sorry. So in terms of the data, yes, we do provide monthly patronage data to each territorial authority. It's probably in a very raw form, not in a sort of layered up and presented in the format that you have requested, but we can certainly look at in terms of what type or format of data that you want. But at this stage, we do supply data to the officers at your councils. And I think you also picked up a really good point around some of the regional service being used by Hamilton. I think we do see that trend. And we also get, I guess, questions or ask around, should we make some of these regional services as a express service without stopping at Hamilton stops? Because I think some of the users from outer district are reflecting, the travel time is getting slow. Can we, so that's certainly something that we look at, whether we can make some of the service become more express only, so it doesn't stop in Hamilton or just a specific drop-off location for people to get off. So, and so Councillor Liz, I think there's 3 questions being raised. So the double-decker, in terms of the data, because the double deck will only introduced in December, so it's not actually in the data set for this report. It will come in as a next reporting. So from what I've seen in terms of January data, it's looking pretty good. But just be mindful, like January, typically, again, we've got quite an extended holiday period, so and then school still hasn't started. So I think it'd be interesting to see the data for February and March, especially when you've got the university and everything back to school, so we can provide that data in the RICS reporting. The other question around the split. So I have had a quick look at the data this morning. So for last quarter, there's 38% increase in terms of patronage. So of that 38%, the split is 6-4 to Cambridge. So 60% is really coming, the growth is coming from Cambridge service and 40% the Amri2. The evening trips. So I think because the timetable were only made, I think April, May last year. So we're still kind of keeping a close look in terms of the patronage result. We don't want to make any sort of major changes without at least 12 months of data. So, but I guess that's something we'll start to look at maybe March, April, when we have the full set of data for 12 months, we will start to evaluate the timetables in the service level as well.
Thank you. Now I've got Mayor Adrian, I've got Angela, then Gayleen.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, I guess it's always interesting, isn't it? Because Matamata and Hauraki are the Eastern Connector, and you got to lift the bonnet to see what's the data really means and what the opportunities might be. And I've seen the raw data that my the council staff have in Matamata, and I just didn't really, it wasn't that, for a person, just a lay person, look at it was pretty, yeah. It sort of turned me off, but that's okay. The reality here is we've got to understand, you can't look at a quarter in isolation, first thing, we've got to look at trends. And I guess the other thing is the bus time change for Matamata, for the Matamata service through as part of this, and whether that's had an impact or will have an impact going forward, because there's got to be a point where we have to understand where's the best value for money, and is this the best option for Matamata, just as I keep saying. But it just, where is it going well and where isn't, when you bundle this, you've got to look under the bonnet and see. That would be my only feedback on that chart.
Thank you. Angela.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for the report. Yeah, just want to look at the on-time performance, and just knowing that we're refreshing the PTP moving forward. Just wondering if the measures that we're using, I know we've talked about this in the past, yeah, are the right kind of measures when you look at those percentages, especially the split between the regional buses and within Hamilton City as well. So yeah, would be keen to have some work come back through the RPTP around what other areas within New Zealand do, especially Wellington seems to have very, very good on-time performance. And just wondering if we could maybe, within different parts of our region have different measures. I think that would give us a more accurate reflection of how we're doing. Often for those people who don't advocate for PT, these kind of percentages can be used against us. So just wondering, if we could make it a bit more reflective on how we're actually doing. Yeah, so keen to see that work brought back. And then just around Te Huia on-time performance as well. I don't need an answer right now. Maybe it can come back through the working group. But yeah, I know through the data that I've seen, like the train is very fast in the Waikato side of the network. And then obviously once it hits the Auckland network, that's when most of the constraints are. So I'm just keen to understand more within the Auckland network, how does our on-time performance, if there is a measure compared to Auckland trains on-time performances. So, and whether, there's anything we can do further in that regard. But yeah, keen to have some thought given to that. And you don't have to answer me now, but yeah.
No, just a couple of reflections maybe that you're right. The 2-year review did certainly say that most of our delays were in Auckland. And at the time and since then, there has been a massive program of work being led by Auckland, which is what's led to delays for everything on the Auckland network. We're hopeful that that's to some extent starting to be behind us. There is still a plan, and Tracy was on the call earlier, but there was a plan for some track rebuild works on the southern line through the middle towards the end of this year, which is probably the last piece of engineering work that could impact the network. Kiwi Rail and Auckland Transport are working on that now. But otherwise, what we're hearing is that most of that work is now finished, and I'd expect our performance within Auckland and alongside the performance of everything in Auckland to be getting a lot better, a lot more quickly. So I think we're definitely monitoring that already. I think maybe when we come to you next quarter, it might be worth giving you a sense of performance in Waikato versus performance in Auckland, and we could start giving you some insights in that space.
Yeah, I think that'd be really useful for Te Huia. And just on that bus side as well, sort of lining it up with, within the city measures, future-proof area, and then wider as well. So sort of along the same lines of where our rating boundaries might sit. So yeah, cool. That was all. Thank you.
Aileen.
Yep, same stuff. Look under the bonnet. I can't see it in here. The conclusions make sense at the end after you've read the report. But the Te Huia, I'm glad it was asked over there because I did have some concerns about the lateness of that train. Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions or comments? No? We have a recommendation there to receive the Public Transport Operations Update Report. A move for that, Mayor Adrian. Seconder for that. Oh, Angela. There's nothing further. I shall put that. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thanks, Vincent. Thanks, Trudy. Thank you. Now we'll go to the last report on our agenda, 7.1. Now, I was going to break this down to a couple of parts. First of all, I wanted to talk about the program, given there's only got 2 more meetings. and then we'll come back in terms of process matters and structures, et cetera, because I think some of that is not so much for me as independent chair, it's for the partners to consider, whereas the program's part of guiding the committee through in terms of its next two meetings through to the end of this triennium. But we'll come back to that in a moment. So throughout the papers, and Phil and the team have touched on in terms of various projects and initiatives that are underway or to come to the committee over the next 2 months. What I was going to propose is that that's put together just in a one-pager and then allocated to the relevant 2 remaining meetings so that members all have an understanding of that. And Phil, I haven't chatted with you about this, but putting that together and then emailing it out to members, not waiting to the next meeting in 3 months, just so that all members then can see the overall program, and that if there was any gaps from a member's perspective, they can come back on that. So
Yes, absolutely. And we've been working on that across all of the committees and all the council meetings for this year. So I'll share the piece for this committee relatively soon.
Okay. Any quick comments on that approach and the program? I suspect they will be reasonably full agendas for the next 2 meetings, and our last meeting is in August. Then we leave it to the electoral processes. Okay.
Sorry,
Sorry,
Mr. Chair, I'm just thinking that it would be also useful to signal to the Future Proof Committee, the work plan of this
Yes.
committee, just to make sure
Yep.
that all members of that committee are across what's happening at this subcommittee.
fair comment.
Not always the same people.
No, so that's noted. So coming around to the committee itself, its role, structure, and that type of thing, is that something that the partners will be reviewing as part of the lead up to the triennium? So I'm just starting that off because it's how much we discuss that now, or that's left to the partners who then review all of that, and then there's those discussions and recommendations to each of the partners. Angela, you're poised there.
Yeah, I think, I think it's good to hear reflections from this group. Yeah, and that will, of course, inform discussions for committee structures for next time round. So.
Okay, and I suppose just making the point that the opportunity for people to put those reflections on the table, but that wasn't going to be for myself as independent chair. That's leaving it to the partners to work that through. So I just want everyone to be clear on the process from here.
Sure.
Thank you, Pamela.
Thanks for raising this, because one of the things we do at Waikato Regional Council is have a piece of work that gets attention from our elected members, reflecting on our committee structure, not just this committee, not just Future Proof, but all of our committees, and collecting the information of if we could do it better, what would that look like? And then that feeds into the next triennium, the next group of elected members who will sit around this table to implement as they see fit. And I am very clear about those particular words, because what the next elected group of people around our council or around anybody's council or anybody's council table is a reflection of what happens on is it the 14th of October?
Yeah, around there.
Something like that.
Haven't got that far
Which
yet.
seems to be looming very large, even though it still seems a ways off. So I think it would be extremely useful for this committee and also future-proof to reflect on what would serve the purpose, the objectives we're trying to achieve sooner rather than later, because we'll be having our conversations. It would be useful to have that insight, particularly from our joint committees, not just this one, and I'll raise the flag for RTC and also for our civil defense and emergency management. Those are the committees where we work as a collective across this region. And then obviously future-proof from a sub-regional perspective. It's important that that we learn from those who take the time and the energy and the resource to contribute around this table to to gain from the knowledge that we've all developed over the 3 years together. So thanks for raising it sooner rather than later.
So if we'll take some top of mind reflections now. In terms of the process, if they are then documented, because there are a number of people who are members of the committee who aren't here.
Yeah, that's
we could
unfortunate.
circulate that out if there was anything to add to that. And really just a series of bullet points as opposed to a big tome.
Yeah, I think it's sorry to just back in there. I think it's about when you're calling for that input. I think it's useful for us to refresh our thinking on what is the objective of this committee and where have we seen roadblocks. So, for instance, I know that there's conversations that happen at this committee that are also part of regional transport committee, not necessarily the future proof committee. And so some specific examples of where maybe our decision making wasn't maybe as informed as we would like it to be, or wasn't the discussion wasn't elevated to the right decision makers. I don't want to preempt what that would look like, but that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Here, Adrian.
Yeah, I guess it's one of the things. Well, it's one of the challenges, isn't it, when you're working in a sub-regional and a region, and how we bring that together. Also highlight the membership and the critical point of having the members at these meetings and the people that are appointed to them to hopefully be here, I think is, you know, it's quite important because then you get consistency of conversation. Whereas you've got different people attending from time to time, if they haven't been at the previous meeting, it does create, you're regurgitating something that might have been discussed previously, but it's a different person at the table. So just really pushing that message around membership and availability to attend.
Thank you. I've got Angela, then Liz.
Yeah. While I think it's really important that elected members also input, I would be keen for staff behind the scenes to input as well, knowing that, there's quite duplication of efforts, the way that we're currently doing what we're doing. And also having meetings on different days exacerbates everyone's duplication of efforts and travel times and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I'm really keen for the governance side, but also the practicalities and the staff time as well. So if all of that can feed in to where we end up, that would be fantastic. But yeah, I'm really keen to hear what everyone else thinks on the ground as well. So yeah.
Liz.
I'll go back to some of my comments before around tier 1 councils, and most of us are, you know, we're high growth, which means public transport wouldn't get the focus and attention it deserves if this committee didn't exist. And, you know, some of the earlier conversations, the earlier comments that Sarah, Councillor Thompson had around making sure that we are all collaborating together at elected member level. And we can miss that when we're in our own councils, especially out there in the region. We're so, circular, looking at it and siloed potentially in our own district. So this just brings that whole boundaryless cross council level, and I think that's really important. And it's our job now, myself and Rogers, to make sure that we get that back to our elected members. So continue the conversations at our level, but ensure that we understand what everybody else is doing. So
That's
thoughts.
just two of us actually being here.
I'm the voice, and Roger does all the work. No, but I mean the data that Roger showed earlier, and having the team here, it's actually really valuable. We can understand the data and really meticulously work through it, and that helps us helps us make our decisions at council level too.
Okay, I've got Galen the Nugent.
Well, Ngā Karuatua is not determined by a date or a year. It has its positives and it has its negatives with that too. It's really made up of people who have a passion for what's happening to their people. So for me, it's a wider thing, like it's an iwi thing that lives in everybody's backyard. And so for us, it's like, so where do we fit without trotting on somebody else's toes? So like mobility, if they was here, they would raise the mobility issues. But I'm specifically talking about a group of people. And sometimes it can be seen like prejudice, but realistically, we have a harder job because we don't have a council to talk to. We just have to go out and educate our iwi the best way that we can. So sometimes it's a little bit harder, but really it's like, what do you need a Ngā Karuatua representative at this table for? You know, without trotting on everybody's toes. I definitely won't talk about finance because we're not putting anything towards it. No, but yeah, it would be really good to make an understanding of other members. What is it that you do want from Ngā Karuatua?
Okay, no, thank you. Eugene.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, look, I agree with all of the comments that have been said. I think some of the things are around probably just the either the duplication or the alignment between RTC and the future-proof committees. I think at the start of this introduction of this committee, we fell away a fair bit with Tahuia because we had a very, very strong working group and we fell away with that, but we've introduced a working group again now, which is somewhat probably on a smaller scale than what it used to be, but it still has the right people there in that space. So I think that's very, very important. The other thing is, I think Angela mentioned about checking in with staff of our councils as well and what's working. I can consider myself very lucky because I've got a fantastic guy in Vishal here we're really in tune on what's happening both in governance and operations within our council. And the other thing is probably more talking about, there's some real good positives that are happening here too. Like I think some of the reporting, sat on with RTC and that as well in the past, but the reporting that's coming through and the information we're getting is getting better and better and better. And, there's out of today's agenda, there's many, many things I can take back to my infrastructure committee and share with my wider colleagues. I agree with Liz about governance and collaboration between our councils as well as not just us members sitting here at this table, but how we collaborate together. And then sometimes that's getting harder and harder because our workloads are just seem to be, doubling up and getting hard. There's not much time in our calendars these days to try to have build up those relationships. But there's some good positives that we're doing here too, Bill. So,
yeah. No, thanks, Eugene. Pamela, anything you'd like to add?
I thought I got in there at the beginning. So
I'm giving you the last word.
no, I'm all good. Thank you.
Okay, I'll work with Phil and the team in terms of getting something together that we get out to members. I think that suggestion in terms of regarding, well, why was the what were the objectives of establishing the committee and that, and asking some of those questions around roadblocks, gaps, and that type of thing is, a bit of a aid memoir to when people are responding back. And also, don't hesitate to comment in terms of independent chair and all that. Not precious. So that's all part of what's up for grabs for comments back into the process. Okay. There's any other final comments from people? Otherwise, that brings us to the end of the. Here, Adrian, you. Yes. Yes.
Move.
Thank you. I'll second it. Yeah. There's no further discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. So that, and I'll come to Phil for a closing karakia in a moment. So that brings us to the end of the meeting. Thanks everyone for your input. We've covered quite a wide range of matters. And just picking up Eugene's point he's just made in terms of the reporting, the presentations, they are just getting better and better and quite focused in terms of the matters that the committee's mandated to deal with. So just an acknowledgement to all of the partner staff and those involved in all of that. So thank you. Cool.
Thank you. Finish with a karakia. Unihia, unihia, unihia mai te uru tapu nui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te hininaro. Te arataka koira e rongo e whakairea ake ki runga, kia tina, tina, humie, huie, tāhie. Everyone.
Meeting closed. Now lunch is in our usual venue.